Now today I have something a little bit different for you guys, and it's going to be a track guide on how to master the Portuguese Grand Prix, aka Portimao. So hopefully you like the sound of that, something a little bit different on the channel. I've not done one of these before, and if you guys like the sound of it and you want to see more of this type of content, then leave a like, subscribe for more, and in the comments down below let me know what track you want to see me do next. So here we are. Portimao, the Portuguese Grand Prix, an absolutely insane track, of course, recently added to the F1 game via the 1.10 patch, and we've got Imola coming soon and Saudi Arabia. So yeah, pretty much in this little series, maybe, depends how this video goes, but for now in this video I'm going to give you guys, to the best of my ability, all the tips, feedback, knowledge and little tricks and things you can do to extract maximum lap time out of this circuit. I'll also show you my setup at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. And again, full disclaimer, I'm not an F1 esports driver, but I would consider myself a relatively fast driver. I'm top 1% all the time in the F1 esports qualifying events. I'm always in the top 30, top 20, pretty competitive, and also I've pretty much been in split one league racing for the last 12 to 16 months. So yeah, we're going to jump into it and we're going to talk you through it. So first of all, we're going to go through the lap at full speed and just give you some basic pointers. Then we're going to watch it back at half speed and a couple of pause frames to really break it down. So Portimao, very important to really get a nice clean exit out of the hairpin prior to this corner, because it's going to give you a lot more straight line speed. Down to turn one, you want to bring the car over to the left. Don't go too far because there is a bug where your lap gets invalidated even though you're not off the track. So try to not go right onto the white line. Down towards turn 3, the hairpin, very important here to open up the corner and get a nice exit over the top of the hill as we open DRS on the back straight. Down to turn 5, I believe, running nice and wide on the entry, second gear on the apex, and then short shifting quite heavily out of here to really clean up that traction. We then head into this double right, very fast first one, followed by a pretty slow and quite oversteery second one. It's very hard to get the car balanced through there. As you can see, it's not easy because as you go over the top of the hill, the car gets very light, and also the back end gets quite light on rotation on corner entry as well. Then this right hander, very complicated, very technical, and then back downhill as we rise once again up to a left hairpin, and then what would technically be the final corner, and very tricky at that because it's off camber, it's downhill, easy to lock the left front, the right front, and you want to make sure you don't do that. You want to try and achieve rotation and also get a clean exit as well at the same time. We're going to cross the start finish line and set a 1:15.9, which is not anything spectacular. We go 102nd in the world. I will admit I don't seem to have particularly great pace around here compared to other tracks, so I need to work on it a bit more. But anyway, let's watch the lap back in 50% speed. So this way I can give you much more detail. We'll also do a couple of pause frames, and hopefully you guys will understand a bit more the fine details of this circuit and what you need to really make sure you clean it up. So again, as I mentioned before, out of the previous right hand hairpin, you want to make sure your exit is very clean. If you want to go super wide to start the lap and maximize tarmac meters, go ahead. It's also pretty good. It's going to gain you a bit of straight line speed. Now there's a bit of a dark patch in the middle of the road here. You don't want to go fully to the left because the track is really bumpy, so just stay slightly towards the middle of the road. Once you get past the start finish, you can move back over to the left into turn 1. Your reference is going to be about 60 to 65 meters. Didn't quite get all of the apex. We ran it beautifully out to the white line, and now we set up the turn 3 brake zone. You can brake on the tarmac or even on the curb / the Astro, but very important here to get the apex, which I didn't really trouble that much. You want to get a lot more on the red and white curb. Quickly back on the throttle, short shifting, very important. And we're going to pause it here because this corner is very technical. It's the first one where it takes a real bit of finesse to get through it. So as you're going up the hill, you gather traction by short shifting through 4th and 5th gear, and it's not going too badly for you. And then once you get to about 2/3 through the left hand corner at turn number 4, you'll feel the back end get light, and what you have to do basically is drive with minimal wheel lock, or in this case, if you're on the pad, don't put in much input lock. Try to keep it quite straight and squared off whilst you traction up, and then you kind of want to turn a lot and max out the lock at the top of the hill. So as soon as the track just about flattens out, that's when you want to really start to turn the lock on, and essentially a perfect line would mean running it out to the white line. So bear that in mind. As you can see here on the exit, we're right on the white line, opening DRS now, down to turn 5 now. Again, similar to turn 3, you can just brake on the tarmac, or you can try to brake on the curb. Now, to be fair, I don't really know what's more beneficial. I probably think using the curb, but I'm not very good at it. We don't fully trouble the apex, but you want to make sure, though, the real key thing here, more than the apex, is getting super clean traction out of this corner, because you can find a lot of time, and running off track onto the Astro seems to work as well. Now, a double right-hander coming up. Now, I'm going to pause the frame in just a couple of seconds. So right here into this corner, this is the real crucial point. So you've got through the fast right, which is a bit of a lift and maybe a dab on the brake, and then as you enter this next right-hander, the back end just gets super light. So a similar concept to turn 3 as we mentioned before. The key thing you want to do here is make sure you don't rotate too early. If you go in with too much lock too early and too aggressive, the car will just spin round. So essentially, you want to try and keep the lock down to a minimum. And what works for me here is short shifting to 5th. There's very low RPM, but it really helps in keeping the car stable on the exit. So essentially, if we run through the corner now, what you want to do is make sure you straighten the wheel as soon as possible. You can see here I've actually had some oversteer, but 9 times out of 10, if you can get the wheel lock cleaned up nice and straight and then short shift to 5th very early, you'll have a much better time of that corner. Then flat out for the downhill left, and then I'm going to pause it again here because this is a very tricky section, and I consider this a double apex right, and there's a lot of different lines you can take through here, and the right one is crucial. So I find you can go really wide up to the curb, you know, both on entry just a couple of seconds before, and also this curb ahead of us right now, this left curb on the left side there. You can use both, but I feel like going a bit too wide and trying too hard to make the corner, you know, a bit too round does actually lose you a bit of time. So what you want to do is when you start the corner off, just a few frames back, you want to make sure you're right on that left curb, and then you want to kind of bring the car as wide as possible on the entry, but then as you approach the midway point and kind of like the in-between zone of both apexes where I've paused the frame right now, this is when you want to start to bring the car into the middle of the track. Gearing, very important here. So 3rd gear and then double shift up to 5th once you clear the apex, because now if you pause the frame, the downhill section you can see right here, there's a bit of a bump and it's just quite a sharp, let's say, drop off. So what's going to happen is the turbo is going to kick in, and suddenly the wheel spin is going to have a pretty strong effect, especially if you're accelerating on a curve. So the double shift from 3rd to 5th, similar to a couple of corners before, is going to be very important in this corner. So bear that in mind, because you can definitely, you know, make up a lot of time here. The more aggressive you are on the curbs around here, the more time you're going to gain. I find I'm not a particularly great curb driver. It's not my style, but if you can do it, you can, you know, be right on the apex, you know, using all the curb and then using all the runoff. You're going to be very fast around here and gain a lot of time. But anyway, let's roll it on as we go back downhill. Keep it nice and tight through this next uphill left. Don't take too much inside curb. It does destabilize the car. And then here into this next left-hander, there isn't a reference point to aim for, so it's very difficult to say, you know, there's only one white line on the right hand side, which is why I've paused the frame right now. Realistically, that's the only reference you have. So as you can see, I pretty much use that as my reference. If you miss that or you don't get it right, there isn't another reference for you to save, you know, the corner or make it. Into this hairpin, I find taking a bit of a later apex helps. So you kind of miss the apex at first and get that rotation in the second half to really, you know, carry that exit speed, as he then helps open up this next right-hander, which is probably the toughest corner on the track, in my opinion, if not, you know, top 2, top 3 without a doubt. So this one takes a lot of finesse, because on entry you can actually go super wide on entry onto the curb, or you could go quite early on the nose, relying on front end on the setup and brake bias and rotation. There's 2 different ways you could take it. In this case, I'm going to go for a bit of an early apex. You know, I'm trying to catch that inside curb, which I don't quite nick. You know, if you do manage to get a bit of inside curb, it's going to help really rotate the car, which I didn't manage to do. And once you clear the apex, it's a bit of a guessing game as to when you put the power down, especially with the new patch. I've tried a few different things, and I find short shifting again is going to be the way to go. Sometimes you go from 3rd to 5th, sometimes 3rd even to 6th. It depends on the drive and how much corner speed you're carrying. So in this particular case, I go for a double shift up to 5th, and manage to get pretty clean traction. So at that point, it's all about keeping the car super tight to this right-hander, the penultimate corner, in this case the final corner now. Just make sure you minimize meters. So the complete opposite concept of when you start the lap, which is you stay as wide as possible, maximize the meters to build up as much speed as possible. Here you're trying to cut the track down and make the lap as short as possible, cutting out meters. So across the line we go, and a pretty decent lap there with a 15.9. I feel like I could do a bit more better than that, especially through turns 1 and 2. But I wasn't quite able to replicate it. I've done about 50 to 60 laps yesterday when I did this, and it was really frustrating, and I wasn't quite able to do it. But yeah, overall that's a track guide. I want to mention a few key areas next. So the key thing for me around this track is rotation and gearing. It's something that I'm not very good at personally, and it's something that if you can get on top of it, you're going to find a lot of time around here. So the first key area for me is turn 3. I feel like the best thing to do here, you can actually take this corner in 4th gear, it is possible, but what seems to work is 3rd and then maybe even a double shift up to 5th. That seems to be the best way to go, and making sure that you get the cleanest run possible onto the back straight. The next key area for me, turn 5, the hairpin, probably one of the hardest corners to get right. Because it's downhill on entry, it's very difficult to brake late and still make the corner. I find you can get away with missing the apex, but the really key thing here is exit speed, and you have to find a way to get a good exit and a fast exit. I still haven't really found what works best for me. If I had to say something, I'd say probably go out off the track onto the Astro and the curb, like in real life. I would probably say take the apex, even though I've done it in 2nd on this lap, I'd probably say take the apex in 3rd, and then double shift to 4th, then up to 5th afterwards. On the Astro to really try and get a clean run into the next section. And then after that, I'd probably say the next key area really for me, besides the middle sector and the kind of the tricky bits, it has to be probably the last 2 corners. Well, the last sort of chicane left right before the last corner technically. So again, you've only got one reference point, and you need to rotate the car nicely to not waste too much time, to get back on the power very, very quickly into the penultimate corner, which is probably the hardest corner on the track, as I mentioned earlier. It's very, very fine margins, and a similar concept to turns 3 and 5 in the sense that you need to try and find a late break point, get that rotation sorted out, and then probably double shift for the best possible traction, and that's going to really help you out. So those 3/4 corners for me are key around here. I think if you can nail those, you're going to be very, very fast. But now let's move into the setup. Now for my setup, I've actually built it around Lucas Blakely's one. So if you guys were not on the PC leaderboards, you can go check out Lucas's setup, which is currently P1 in the world. Obviously, the setup does seem to be made for TT, and I've basically adapted it for a more raceable, let's say, environment. So hopefully this should work well in racing. So we've gone for 7/8 on the wings. Pretty decent balance. You could actually run probably 8/8 at the expense of a bit more oversteer. If you can drive it and control it, you would be faster with 8/8. Transmission 155. Pretty self-explanatory. 55 is on the lower side because we need to rotate the car more, especially during all of these corners, as I mentioned in the track guide. Suspension geometry, I've gone to -2.8, -2, 0.8 and 0.2. Again, these could be a bit more pushed out to the extreme, but ultimately we've gone for, let's say, a raceable setup. So yeah, then suspension wise, 1.5, 1.3 and 2.6. I double checked these. I'm pretty sure these are safe for floor damage on sim damage around here anyway, so you should be okay. If not, go up to 3.7 and then you should be okay, and it won't make a massive difference. If you want to go 3.7, you could go 8.8 on the aero to compensate, so bear that in mind. Brakes 156. Again, if you want to be super fast, try 55. I can't drive it because I'm not great with rear brakes. And then finally, tire pressures 23.4 and 23.1. If you get overheating issues, just go down by a couple of clicks if necessary, but that should do the trick on the setup. But yeah guys, that's going to be it, and I think I'm happy with that. I think there was enough information there without overloading or going too long on the video, and you've got my setup now. So if you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe for more, let me know in the comments and down below your feedback, and if you want to see more of this type of content. As always, hopefully you enjoy the content, and yeah, finally check out the 2 videos on screen if you haven't seen them already. But I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care, and it's goodbye from me.